Okay, so here's another set of scales. These ones are ready to go onto a knife, and they're looking good. I cleaned up the edges on these, and the reason for that is, say you're trying to line up your spacer material on these ones, it's very difficult to do when they're covered in glue or they're recessed back, behind the edge of this material. It's difficult to do. So just sanding this side on the belt grinder or hand sanding it, cutting it on the bandsaw and then hand sanding it, whatever you need to do to get it cleaned up, then you can really tell the minute variances when you're lining up those spacers. And I prefer to line up my spacers face to face, and there's a couple reasons for that. If you're lining them up with back to back or liner to liner, sometimes when you use thicker liners, it's very difficult to tell if you're actually a line or not, because there's that gap there. So lining them up face to face, you can tell where those edges touch, whether you're lined up or not. And the other thing too is when I attach these to a knife, I will line these up where the spacer is going to go on the knife handle, how much white material or this upper bolster material is going to be, and then the bottom portion of the handle. And then I drill through the face of the scale. And the reason I do that is because especially on wood, you can have some blowout, or like JG10, it's better to drill through the face of it and then out the back, versus coming from the back out the face. That way, if you do have any little chip out, it's on the back of the handle and you can sand that flush, and then it's going to get filled in epoxy on the knife. Versus the front, you would have to thin the scale down to get rid of that hollow chipped out area around your pinhole. So that's my preferred way of doing it. And so what I'll do is I'll line this up, and then I will clamp it and then drill those holes, and this will be the left side scale. And then I'll take these and line up the spacers on both sides, and then I will transfer the holes from the left side scale down through the face of this one and come out the back, and then that's the right side scale. So that's one or the way that I do it, to make sure that I don't have chip out and that my holes align perfectly. I don't clamp them all on the knife, because lining up the knife, the spacer on the knife handle from the back side is pretty difficult. So I wouldn't want to do it that way. It just is more precise if I do it the other way, or works for me. Another thing that you want to check is when you're lining up your spacers, these, I just cleaned up the edges on the belt grinder. I didn't have any square reference surface to like make them square, so these will be a little bit off. So let's line up this face and then flip it over, and you can see that they're way off on this side. So how we remedy that is by rotating these to line up your spacers, because we know the edges of the scales are not perfectly square, but if you line up the lines on the spacers, then that is the end goal, because you don't want the spacers to be lined up on like the spine of the knife, and then you flip it over and then these are all off because it looks bad. So just a little bit of rotation, and they're lined up on both. So double check that you don't have too much hangover, that it's not going to fit your handle. So mark that little hangover area when your spacers are aligned, and then you can put your knife handle on there and we're clear. There's plenty of space down here, plenty of space up here because my handle's only coming up to this portion. But if that hangover if they're like way out of square and that hangover is pretty significant and eats into where your tang goes, then you either have to change the profile of your knife, which you probably don't want to do, or just use these scales for another project, say a skinnier handled knife, or one that has like a straighter geometry or something like that. So okay, so since I'm doing a batch of these knives, I have a handle template where I've marked out where I want my spacer, and that makes sure that the spacers all land the same on every knife that I'm doing. If you're just doing a one-off, just pick where you want it to be, so it doesn't interfere with pinholes. You don't want your pins coming through in the middle of your spacer or on the edge of it. You want them to come through above or below. But anyway, so since I have a handle template, I went ahead and marked my line of the bottom of the spacer there and there. So now I can take this and put it on the knife, and then I know I have the same like line. It's not going to be like canted across the blade or the handle funky. So I will line this up on either side and then clamp it in place, and then we'll drill our tang holes. Okay, we have the blade clamped on here. We're gonna drill the top pinhole, put a pin in it, and then move the clamp up, drill the bottom and then the middle. So these are 3/16 is what I'm using on this. I like to rest everything on a 1, 2, 3 block to ensure that my holes are perpendicular to my handle material and the blade. So nice clean hole. We'll take a pin, put it down in there, and that'll hold that in place. And then we'll shift this clamp up above here. We'll do the bottom, move the clamp, and then we'll do the center. Okay, we have a nice clean pinhole there. We'll put another pin in it. And then we'll shift this clamp down. Not really necessary, but make sure it holds everything nice and flush against the face of that scale, and then we'll drill this last pinhole. Okay, last one's in. Now it's time to line up the faces of the scales and then transfer these holes onto the other scale. Okay, before I remove this, I will trace around it. And now it's easier for me to tell which is left and which is right, and even sometimes I will write on the back of it, left. All right, so now I'm gonna line up the spacers just like I showed before. We'll clamp them up and then transfer the holes. Okay, we have our right scale now, and we'll do a quick test fit so we can trace it. There we go, pins are in, She fits. Trace it. And there we go. So left and right. Now I will mark the top section of the scales. I'll rough cut them out, and then I will fit them to the knife using the belt sander, and then maybe we'll come back and show you what that looks like. Okay, we have the scales rough profiled to the tang. As you can see, they are perfectly lined up, both on the top and the bottom of the tang. And yeah, so now I'll go through and chamfer them, hand sand, shape, everything, and finish out this blade. I have to hand sand it and do all that. So anyways, that's my process for doing segmented scales and fitting them properly to a knife. So if you have any questions, or if you have better methods that you use, I'd love to hear them in the comments below, because I'm always trying to refine my processes and make things faster and better and easier. So thanks for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.